formula's not that complicated. Now, as adults in adult bands, we're like, well, I have a job. I don't have time to work with everyone one-on-one. Cool, man. But until you figure out some sort of way to ensure that your individuals are improving as individuals, then once you figure out what Bandcraft elements you're going to do, that's going to represent the ceiling, as high as you're going to go. All right, Jim. Well, season 2, episode 2. Is this season 2 or not? I mean, we took a long break, but I also feel like, didn't we take a break last August too? But I think it's season 2 because the Finding Bagpipe Freedom era has more or less come to a close.
Yeah, that's a landmark thing. Yeah, that whole first, was it like a year and a half that we were working through Finding Bagpipe Freedom now and again, every other-ish episode or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's done. So you need to write another book. I think is the conclusion there.
You know, it's funny you should mention that because I kind of did. The tuning algorithm thing, like I wrote that course, but it came out as it was like 125 pages of writing, and then we did all the interviews, transcripts as well for that. So I kind of did. I haven't just been sitting around recording podcasts, Jim.
What else does this guy do?
Yeah. I've also got another kind of big project happening, which I'm excited about. So I don't know. We'll see.
But it's not quite ready to, is that cat not quite coming out of the bag just yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. We'll look forward to an announcement.
It's also one of those projects that I'm excited about, but also I think the world in general is going to be like, oh, okay.
This is what we were supposed to be hyped about?
Yeah. But it's just something that needs to happen, and I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a fun little teaser. So exciting things happening at the dojo, huh? Not getting stagnant, not just sitting, not coasting at the dojo.
By the way, I need to get something off my chest. After years of badgering me to do small piping at the dojo, we're finally doing it. And I
saw that.
And thank you for that, because I'm struggling with, I don't feel like the world is excited enough.
Yeah. They should be more excited.
I finally figured out this puzzle. I got Zeffen teaching the small pipes.
Zeffen, yeah.
Couldn't be like a better possible instructor that fits in with the overall vibe of the dojo. And like he had a great turnout. He had his first class last night, being September 9th, because who knows when this podcast is coming out, but awesome first class. But anyway, people, this is the moment, right? You've been asking for it. Now you're getting it. So show me the excitement. I want to see the excitement. I want to feel it. Come on now.
Big excitement for small pipes.
Big excitement for small pipes. I like it.
Yeah, Zeffen, very accomplished individual. Definitely knows what's going on. He provided a lot of the commentary for at least one of Dr. Stephanie Burns' books, maybe both of them too.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He was in there, yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those things, like Zeffen and I have a lot in common. I mean, because we did a lot of our developing in the British Columbia SFU pipe band ecosystem. Zeffen plays an SFU pipe band. We should have him on the podcast. That'd be great, by the way. And but plays in the SFU pipe band, teaches RMM, taking all the big solo prizes, or at least moving in that direction over in Scotland, which is great, playing some small pipes, doing some teaching. Makes bags at Lee & Sons.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I saw that on his little bio blurb that the dojo put out. Yeah. I didn't realize that he'd been a bag maker, yeah.
And also just top class professional dude.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting. Okay, so Jim, on the docket today, we have a complicated algebraic equation that we have to decipher.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Your friend of mine, Mark, very cool person, Mark, writes into the show.
Is it just Mark, or is it actually, do I know this Mark?
I actually I've heard his last name pronounced so many times, even from him, but it's hard to say. Mark P.
Mark P.
I think it's Pekanon, but I'm almost sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. And it's been years that I've been telling myself, like, I got to get that straight.
Yeah.
At this point, maybe I'll never pull it off. But Mark, really good friend.
Thanks for writing in, Mark. Thanks for writing in.
And Mark says, he presents us with this equation. He suggests this for discussion. He says, okay, hypothesis. Just a
hypothesis means, this is just for my own double checking here. Hypothesis means like this is an idea and we're trying to figure out if you're right or wrong about this idea.
Yeah, we're tossing this idea out there. Let's see, does it hold up? And that hypothesis is a successful...
Kind of like my hypothesis is the sun rises every day.
And let's see, does it rise? It does? Okay, feel pretty good about that.
Except unless you're on the International Space Station where it actually rises far less often.
Hey, okay,
Or you could be, or maybe depending on your orbital speed around the Earth, it might not actually rise every day.
Maybe it never sets if you get on the right, on the right track there. So it never rises because it never sets.
Cool. Got it. So it's like an explanation. It's an attempted explanation of how the world works.
Yeah. Let's see if this is,
Okay.
Here's the hypothesis. Maybe the world works this way. Does it? So the hypothesis is a successful band in grade N has the majority of its players at grade N+1 solo level.
Yeah.
Grade 4 bands need a lot of grade 3 soloists. Grade 1 bands have a lot of open members. If these conditions are not met, this is the if-then thing, if these conditions are not met, then the band will languish in the lower half of the grade.
Okay.
And verbatim in the note that he sent in, he did give us a discuss.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. It's funny, but when we screened this question before, I thought I was going to go one way with this. Maybe, but actually, I think my knee-jerk reaction here at this point is, I think I kind of agree. Good episode, Jim.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Cool. What are we going to talk about? Right.
So I think I sort of agree. So basically what he's saying is that if the level of the players in your band is a little bit high, relative to the level of the band itself, or at least the prescribed sort of grade level, that the band will tend to improve moving toward the level of players in your band. Sounds like that's what he's saying.
Yeah, I think that's another way to put exactly what he's getting at. Yeah.
And I think I agree with that. I believe strong. So this is my knee-jerk reaction. We'll talk nuance here in a moment, but great band. A band can only be great if its individuals are great. Period.
Yeah, this seems reminiscent of like the later chapters of Finding Bagpipe Freedom, where it's like, if the players in the band have achieved bagpipe freedom, the band will achieve bagpipe freedom.
I've never seen it. I've been in the game a long time. I've never seen a band where the constituents weren't that great, but as a team, they achieved a greater result. I've never seen it. Sometimes you wish it to be true, but I've never seen it. Yeah, totally. And then to improve a band, and I've been involved in improving many bands, but to improve a band at the end of the day, you can practice and practice and practice as a team. But unless the individuals improve their own individual, let's say, weaknesses, which means the individuals themselves are improving as players, right? Unless that's happening, I've never seen significant band progress. By the way, you can improve the individuals or you could replace the weak individuals with strong ones. Those are your two options.
Hypothetically, at least, sometimes there aren't strong players around, so you just got to improve the players. That's just all there is to it.
Correct. Yeah. And probably realistically, you want to be doing a little bit of both, but not a lot, but maybe not a lot. Obviously, you don't just want to be like always on the lookout for better players so that you can kick your weaker players to the curb. I mean, that's a tough way to run a band.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And your longevity. And your longevity is going to be really kind of minimized. However, at the highest levels, I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know if this is correct, but at the highest levels, it's kind of what goes on quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like that makes more sense at the highest levels, though. Like everybody gets it.
It doesn't surprise me. Yeah, it's like, a professional baseball team, you're always trying to wheel and deal to replace your weaker players with stronger ones.
Yeah.
Like in professional sports. And then in the top bands, there's always a little bit of that going on, I would say. Where you're always trying to bring new players in, but you're not going to bring in the top level bands. You're not going to bring in players that are significantly below the level of the band, unless they have tons of moldability and
Very
tons of
teachable.
potential. Yeah, and they're very teachable, and they have tons of potential without, they have tons of potential to become your highest level players. And then you
Yeah.
might bring in someone that's green if that's the case. But so it's a tough game, but it could be any level. So in grade 4, you're going to be more, you're going to have to be more on the your game plan to improve your band is going to be a lot more player development focused. It's going to have to be.
It's gotta be, yeah. That's one thing. This is like tangential-ish, but maybe plays into it too, that like has occurred to me before that, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems pipe bands in terms of like, how would you put it? Like options for membership or availability of players, we have kind of an hourglass situation where it's like, if you want to have a grade 5, maybe even grade 4 band, there's going to be a lot of people, and I say a lot, it's relative, right? But you'll probably be able to find people who want to learn, like beginners,
Maybe.
And at the top, if you're a grade 1, maybe even a grade 2 band, you're going to have, again, it's relative, but kind of a lot of those really good players, they're going to be interested in playing with you, right? People will want to join those bands. You've got this spot in the middle where these grade 3 and grade 4 bands, I think to some extent, are basically developing players to pass them on. You know what I mean? It feels that way sometimes, at least. It feels like that's that middle ground. Maybe it's kind of hard to build numbers there, because it's like you got people learning on the other end of the spectrum and people moving on to the other end, and you're kind of in the middle, passing people through.
For sure. I think that there's a hidden dark side to this discussion, maybe, which is that what's the real reason many of us play in pipe bands?
Like, I'd like to think that it is because we get joy from doing it, but because you already suggested there's a hidden dark side, so I'm already going like, is it because we really want to win and that feels good, and so then we stack the band with players who are
I'm not sure that's it. I think where I'm going with this is there's one of the reasons many of us play in bands. It's because it's a place where you can exist with very little accountability and very little exposure and very little criticism, right? Like a lot of people play in bands because in solos, everybody can easily hear your weaknesses and give you criticisms because you can hear you playing specifically. But if you can make it into a band, right? Now let's say the band doesn't sound good. Well, try and prove it's me, bro.
Yeah, it's the band that doesn't sound good, not exactly me.
It's not me. It's not me. I'm here every week. It's not me, bro.
And I can fool others, but maybe more importantly, myself into thinking like, well, I'm pulling the band along, I'm in the top half of this band, and there are these other people who aren't as good as me.
Yes, exactly. It's a great place where we can sort of hide, and then our accountability to actually improve ourselves is less.
That's worth thinking about, Andrew. You're making me do some soul searching, dagnabbit.
Yep. And then what you can do is you can like work your band really hard as a pipe major. You can work your band really hard. Maybe you can get the band up to grade 4, but you're probably not going a whole lot further than that because your band is populated largely by those who aren't going to practice in between band practices to improve themselves. And they're not going to go get private lessons, and they're not going to challenge themselves by, playing the solos in the morning at the games. They're just not going to do that stuff. And so what's the writing on the wall here? Well, it goes back to my original kind of agreement with Mark. Was it Mark or Mike? It was
Mark, yeah.
My original agreement with Mark P., which is, I think he's right. I think that the quality of the band trails the quality of the constituents.
And I do wonder too, like maybe a factor to plug in here is that maybe not everybody in the band is actively soloing the year that you take the numbers down to verify whether this hypothesis is accurate. But it still stands that like if these individuals were soloing, then they would be in, the N+1 category.
Yeah, well, and soloing is just one way to do it.
To like
I remember, when we had the Ora and Moore pipe band, we had some players that come to mind that didn't really solo, but they practiced hard and they got better and they listened to the feedback and they integrated stuff and they were making improvements kind of without using solos as like the vehicle to do that. And so that's fair, but we need to be improving the individuals. in Oranmore, that's the thing we discovered. And we've talked about it before on the podcast, but once you get the breaks figured out, right? And once you know how that's all going to work, and you've worked on a couple of quote unquote ensemble issues with the drum corps, what else is there really? Oh, and you've worked on your tuning routine. So you've figured out a good plan of how you're going to get the band to sound decent, which, by the way, is not rocket science. What's the thing that derails the tune-up process? The thing that derails it is that individuals can't produce a good sound consistently. That's what derails it. So again, it points to individual skill. So anyway, but once you've done those things and you've got a plan for that, which, in Oranmore, it took several years before we had like a solid plan and routine on some of those things, let's say. But like, once you're there, what do you have to do? And I remember coming to the realization with Oranmore, it's like, the way to move forward here is we don't need 2 band practices a week. We can get away with 1 every week, maybe even only 2 a month, as long as the individuals are working on their stuff and getting better and improving. And we started off on on the grind of working with each individual in the band. Like, cool, what are we doing here?
That you blow my mind. Just I suddenly had like this imagined possibility, like what if, I'm not saying it would work, but like what if we did an experiment with a pipe band where they only had band practice once a month, but there was practice, like there was a thing happening every week, but what was happening on the other 3 weeks was individual work between the pipe major and every individual. And so then it's like a lot of individual work, and it culminates with, now let's try to put it all together.
Yeah.
Is that actually how it's supposed to be? Like, maybe not in that schedule, but it's like, oh yeah, if I'm a contributing member, it's like what you said that one time, Andrew, that a good pipe band is made up of a bunch of leaders. You put it in a better way.
Yeah.
A bunch of pipe majors, and I don't remember
how I put it. Yeah.
Everybody's a pipe major, just only one of them is actively pipe major or something like that,
A lot of people often ask me like, man, it must be like crazy hard to play in Inverary because you're so far away and you can't go to the practices. And it is. It's hard to do. But like the game plan is, I'm going to make my individual game as strong as I can possibly make it on my own. Okay. And then when I go to band practice, there'll just be a few odds and ends I have to sort out. And that's how you do it. Right. But by the way, it's how the locals are doing it too. It just looks a little different because they're able to go to practices more often. But it's like when I get to my first band practice next May or whenever it's going to be, hopefully my personal playing form, top notch. Right. And then what do I have to do? I just have to make sure I double check that I know what I'm doing in all the breaks. And I'm going to have to pick up on some of the nuances during the slow air because that's a difficult thing. So there's a slow air in the medley. But, aside from that, I'm good. Because most of it comes down to how well you can deliver as an individual. It doesn't have to do it, like rehearsals don't play into it that much. By the way, pipe bands might be slightly unique in that respect. Like if you're in a marching band, your individual skill comes into play, sure, but then it seems like there's a lot of marching and back and forth. And if one guy is missing, it throws off the whole thing and blah, blah, blah. So it might not be true in all types of musical band pursuits, but for pipe bands, and for me, I'm like a 3rd ranked player or something like that. For me, I just kind of go in there and try and make sure I'm solid. It's individual.
Yeah.
That comes first. When you watch the NFL, what makes an NFL team better than a college team? It's not really the amount of time they've spent playing football. It's just how much of a beast everybody is by default. That's the part that's so easy to overlook. Like if a really good high school football player, they'd probably last 5 plays in the NFL.
Right. Yeah. When every single person on that field can move their 300-pound body of pure muscle at incredibly high speeds for a really long time, it's going to be an impressive team.
It seems like the plays that they're running and all that stuff is the most important part, but it's not. It's like, but the NFL, you're looking at people whose entire life is devoted to being a great individual football player. Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
You need it all. Don't misunderstand me. Like
you
you need to have, like the pipe band, you need to have a great team and you need to have a great tune-up strategy and all that stuff. But without great individuals who can deliver, It's going to wash away a lot of the team genius.
Yeah, like throwing as many metaphors into the mix as possible here. It occurs to me that like maybe we could look at this like a jigsaw puzzle, where like you do need all the elements that make it come together. That's the leadership and the team playership and all that kind of stuff. That all does matter, obviously, because you're not going to get the finished puzzle if you don't put it all together. But if any of your pieces don't have the image up where it's supposed to be, or the image is flipped upside down, or it's faded or something like that, then even when you try to put it all together, it's not going to look like it's supposed to look.
Yep.
So the individual thing, that's key. You got to have the right pieces in the first place. And that's not to discourage anybody to be like, oh, until you're good, don't join a band. Rather, just join the band and keep working on yourself, Keep getting better.
And then what I would want is for people to like, let's go take it back to grade 4 or 5. People are going to join my band with the understanding that band practice is one part of your responsibility, and then the other part of your responsibility is to be improving as an individual at a nice steady pace alongside the rest of your teammates.
Right? Yeah, the classic problem that just come up here before is when individuals aren't doing their own instrument maintenance. You can't spend band practice time taking care of instruments,
That's right.
So it goes to that. It's rhythm and it's finger accuracy and it's form. It's all these things. It's also something so basic as taking care of your instrument.
But you got to be a great piper, right? And you can't be a great piper unless you're maintaining your pipes. Just like you can't be a great athlete if you only eat Cocoa Puffs, right? You're going to need some protein in there somewhere. You know what I mean? But anyway, you're going to have to know that. I mean, like, I'm sure an NFL team has nutritionists and stuff. Like,
surely,
got it. Yeah, but like, you got to be able to deliver on that.
Yeah.
They probably. I wonder how many of NFL players just have their own chef.
I've got to imagine. I mean, if I was making the money that NFL players do, I would immediately have a chef. Mostly just because I wouldn't have to make food anymore. Like, it's not even because of the nutrition. It's just the convenience, just life.
Totally. Yep. But anyway, it all points to this. Now, let's go back to remind me of our algorithmic equation algebra one more time.
So that is a successful band in grade N has the majority of its players at grade N+1.
Okay.
And then the if-then thing that's important is if that's not the case, then they will languish in the lower half of the grade of whatever that N is.
Okay. My other thought about this is that as a basic idea, it makes sense to me, but literally there's a lot of potential problems with this equation. The first one is that we're talking about grade levels, and grade levels are completely outside of our control. For example, the quality of grade 5 in the East Coast of the United States might be different than the quality of grade 5 in Utah, right? Or there might be years where, for whatever reason, the population in grade 5 is low. And even though your band isn't very good and the individuals are at a low level, maybe you do have success just because that's where the chips fell on the table.
Right. You medal at every
versa.
competition and then you pause and go, wait, there were only 2 bands.
And vice versa could also be true. Like, for example, Cameron McDougall just moved to New Jersey, right? Even though I'm playing the best solos I've ever played, this is a hypothetical. It's obviously not true. But even though Joe or Jim Bob or whatever is playing the best solos ever, well, Cameron McDougall just moved to town, so you're going to win less often.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen as often.
You see what I mean, though?
Yeah.
So so you got to remember that grade levels and all that stuff, like that's just an arbitrary system that we use to try to govern our competitions. Yeah. And we shouldn't be hyper-focused on grade level because who knows, suddenly a bunch of grade 4 bands dissolve. And then now this year you're winning all the time, but you could be winning all the time this year, even though last year you were better. And it could just be, and it could be because of things that are outside of your control. And by the way, that totally happens. I mean, Inverary had one of the best worlds ever last year in 2023. The band played great, but guess what? 2 other bands played really great also, and they ended up ahead of us. Even though our band might have been the best ever, we got one of the worst results we'd had in 10 years.
Yeah.
You catch my drift? Well, maybe 8 years. But
that makes sense.
Like the algebraic equation, generally-ish in spirit makes sense to me, but literally is kind of silly, and I wouldn't want to put too much stock in it. because of because there's so many ingredients of that algebraic equation that doesn't really have any of my attention on a day-to-day basis because it's all outside of my control. Like the whole grade level thing. And languishing. Like languishing, whether or not you quote unquote languish in your grade has a lot to do with outside forces and may or may not correlate to how good your band is.
Yeah, I think that seems like good things to keep in mind for sure. It does occur to me that like Pythagoras might have given us a formula to make a perfect triangle, supposedly, right? But if you get on a whiteboard and use that formula, but then maybe if you zoom in because of the width of your felt tip on your marker or because of inconsistencies on the whiteboard or something, you realize there's actually no such thing as a perfect triangle. Like this describes an ideal in an ideal situation. And so maybe that's applicable here too, where if we could remove all these messy variables, this would probably prove pretty darn consistently true.
Sure.
There are
that's a slightly different argument that I'm making, but also true. Yeah, there's not going to be, there's no perfect formula for doing this. But our points are divergent. My point is more the classic Stoic point, which is that we don't want to focus on things that are outside of our control, basically.
Yeah.
And then your point is more that it's impossible to do anything perfect in reality, even though it might be theoretically perfect in our minds.
It seems like it could be a useful formula, Mark's formula here, though. Like if I'm just thinking, if I'm running a pipe band and I'm like looking for some ways to improve, it seems like it could be useful to encourage all the players to like, let's all solo,
It's not useful, it's essential.
And then it gives you kind of a goal where it's like, you wouldn't want to be making people feel bad, but it's like, if I'm in a grade 4 band, let's all work towards soloing in grade 3. Let's like work toward that, and that surely is going to improve the band, right?
For sure. 100%. If I take my grade 5 band, right? Let's say we're languishing in grade 5. All right.
Such a good word. Use it as many times as you can. I love that word.
I love that word, languish. Let's say we're quote unquote languishing in grade 5. Okay. Now let's do a hypothetical. Let's change nothing about the band at all. Except I'm going to replace all my players with players from Field Marshal Montgomery. I'm going to change nothing else. I'm not going to change the material.
Yeah.
I'm not going to change how we do the breaks. I'm not going to change how I run practice. I'm not going to change how often practice is. Nothing like that. It's just that I'm just going to replace all my players with players from Field Marshal Montgomery.
Yeah.
Predict the outcome. Predict whether or not we'll continue to languish in grade 5, Jim.
I predict that languishing becomes a thing of the past immediately.
In grade 5. Now, if I really do change nothing else, will we top out in grade 2? Yeah, maybe.
Probably, yeah.
But like
if material stays the same and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'm not saying a band is 0% bandcraft. Obviously, bandcraft plays a big role, especially at the highest levels. So like, the bandcraft is going to augment, hopefully, what your individuals are doing. Okay. But if your individuals are super weak, then you're going to be augmenting something super weak.
Right.
And then if your individuals are super strong, then your bandcraft is going to be augmenting something super strong. I mean, I think you're seeing that at the Worlds. Man, it's like bandcraft and the individual players is at such a high level. Like, damn, the level was so high this year and last year. It's like freaky. It never used to be that way.
Yeah.
It used to be if you could get great tone and play clean, that you're in the top 3 for sure. Like easy.
Musical acrobatics happening these years.
Yeah.
There's just
and then now there's now bandcraft has to be so solid. And you have to kind of take what you used to consider to be bandcraft and ask like, okay, what's the next level here? Because it's so high. Like the players, man, at the top of grade 1. So there's just, everyone's so amazing. There's no weak links in the top bands, really. Like not in the sense that there used to be.
Yeah. I want you to feel, of course, completely free to correct me here, Andrew. But it seems to me like there is a shift in my own understanding that's happening that like bandcraft then, though very important, especially at the highest levels like you're describing, is also very secondary to individual players and their strength as players.
Yes. I think that's an important way of looking at it. So like, let's say bandcraft is 20% And just the quality of the individuals is 80%. Like in my estimation. Let's just go with that. That might be wrong. Totally wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this. But then meanwhile, in most band practice halls, where do you see the focus? I see the focus 80% Bandcraft. Like, guys, we got to run that again. Guys, we got to run that again. We know that break wasn't quite right. No, like you got to whatever, this kind of thing. Whereas if the quality of your players are better, all of those issues naturally kind of evaporate because players are just good and intuitive and strong. For example, if everyone in the band is capable of realizing that their B is out of tune, then you don't have to spend an hour trying to find whose B is out because that player just knows. And in Inverary, we totally have that. Totally. Where someone will give a wink to one of the tuners if there's an issue, but otherwise you just go with it and you're confident and you're strong, and you know what I mean? Same goes with the drones. The drones is another one. It's like they're going to keep circling the drones, but then every now and then someone will give a little wave to one of the drone tuners like, the drones don't seem totally locked over here. And then they'll come over and sure enough, they'll tweak one of the drones and then you get that. You're like, there it is. But what is that? That's individual intuition and knowledge and experience and level of play. And it's, pretty cool. And at band practice, you want to work on your bandcraft primarily. But that's something where it's not like you should come to band practice and give everyone an individual lesson. That's not really what I'm saying. So you got to figure it all out somehow.
So I've had this experience, and like what you're describing is exactly the mental shift that's happening in my head where I'm like, oh wait, if individual playership is primary and bandcraft is secondary, that means in my short stints as pipe major or otherwise like leading or teaching groups, I've had it flipped around. I've been doing exactly the opposite of what I should have been doing.
Yeah.
And I've even had the experience of trying to put together a medley that incorporated humble versions, albeit humble versions of top level bandcraft stuff that I was seeing, at the Worlds, like trying to put a little reprise in or something like that.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. And why didn't it work? And now I'm seeing why it didn't work. The focus was in the wrong place. You got to have that solid base first. Then you can do the cool stuff.
Another, for me, the classic painful example there is like, you listen back to the band and the tuning sounds really crappy. Man, where are we going wrong in the tuning process? What did we do wrong? Like, what happened? Why is the tuning sound so rough? And then as a leader, as the person who tuned up the band, you're like, what do we need to do to tune up the band better? What do we need to do? We need to figure this out. But what's the real issue? It's just that the individuals aren't capable of playing in tune. That's the issue. It's not really the tuning process that's the issue. Like, people will do everything imaginable to try and get the tuning process better, except for the thing that you need to do, which is somehow we got to teach these people what it means to play in tune and how to sense that and how to produce that on their own and how to understand that. As a leader of the band, you might have that understanding, but usually we drastically overestimate what the constituents are capable of.
I hesitate to share this, Andrew, just because in the brief stints that I've been a pipe major, it's been brief and it's been with my friends, my closest friends, and so I'm not, and I've never been the strongest player in any pipe band that I've been in ever, never have been. And so I'm not trying to come across as being like, well, I was doing so great. And then I realized my friends weren't good at bagpipes, that's not what I'm trying to say.
I see. Yeah.
But I had an experience one time that stands out in my mind where we'd been drilling a timed medley. And we'd been drilling it, to the point of this is what we were doing, not 80% of our time in band practice, 98% of the time in band practice. Oh, that didn't work. Let's do it again. That didn't work. Let's do it again. Yeah. And we finally went, okay, you know what? I, as the pipe major, will go and sit at this table over here and just get each piper through, and let's just see if we can weed out where the problem is. And my mind was blown at how many of the constituents in this band didn't know the tunes well enough to play them by themselves.
Yeah.
It wasn't even there. And that's, I'm not trying to say
it goes back a little bit to what I was talking about with the hiding aspect too.
Yes. It was hiding in the band. And it's like, why isn't the band working? And then realizing oh, there are 3 or 4 of us who couldn't make it through the medley by ourselves. We're coming in and out or playing the wrong thing and then correcting and stuff. You can't be having that happen as a band.
They have a nervous breakdown, or maybe they're capable of playing it. But when you ask them to play the sets in front of their peers, they have a nervous breakdown and can't handle it. But those nervous breakdowns, I can't play the stuff in front of my peers. is very similar to the nervous breakdowns people have on the competition field. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, suddenly the stakes are high and I have a total meltdown. And that's part of being a good individual. You need to not freak out.
You know? I don't know about you,
It's
Andrew,
not just about F-doublings. It's also about just not freaking
F out.
Yeah.
I've always told myself in my head, however well I can play it by myself, when I go to perform it, I'm going to be at least 10% worse.
Not necessarily.
That's what I tell myself, at least.
Yeah, but that's a natural thing, and it does happen, but you can prepare. So like adrenaline can be a positive or a negative, right? So adrenaline can take you apart, or it can give you that little something extra, right? And it all depends on how you prepare.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like adrenaline can help you lift a car off your baby's foot or something, you know? Yeah. That's good. We like that. Yeah. That's augmenting what would normally be possible.
It can also make you, though, forget the second part of the reel, and that's what we don't want.
Yeah, I always remember that. And maybe it was just in my head, but I always remember that about the SFU pipe band. On the day of the Worlds, we were always better than ever before. With the possible exception of 2007, and this is just my experience in the band, just because it was an absolute deluge. So like, so coming away with something just decent in those conditions was probably superhuman, but at the time it felt like a bit of a letdown. Yeah. But like, yeah, we were always, I thought, and maybe it was just in my head, but like, I feel like Jack and Terry, back in the day when I played in the band, Jack and Terry were the leaders of the pipe corps. I feel like they were just masters of like constructing this full season where they're training you and they're training you and they're training you to like actually, you know, deliver extra on the day. Yeah, I just have that feeling.
So there's like a timing to like the story arc of the season so it can like climax at the competition.
Yeah, it's probably not the best to peak. You know, you don't want to peak at Bellingham Games in late June or whatever. Was it late or early June? I can't remember. But like, that's not when you want to peak, right? And so they wouldn't peak then. You know, you know, you save some of it, and then you're on this like cool trajectory. Anyway, it just always, my memory, it was just always like, man, we were so good at the Worlds, and it was so exciting. The Worlds was different then too, though, because it was just 2 circles. 4 circles is so much different than 2, and the weekend has become a marathon, and totally like a marathon, not a sprint. Sounds like a cliche, but that's completely what it's become now. The World used to be a sprint where it's like, we're going to play our MSR, we're going to crush it. And then we're going to play the medley and we're going to crush it. And then
you can drop your pipes and not think about them for 2 months.
And then we're good. And that was it, right? You know, so it's just one afternoon of playing. And now it's 28 hours. All right. And think about it. It's like 4 times 2-hour tune-ups. Now, don't misunderstand me. You're not playing for 2 straight hours. But like, that's 2 straight hours of focus that you're doing 4 times inside of 28 hours. Like, do the math.
It's a lot of focus. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 8 hours of focus inside of 28 hours. And then you get rewarded for it by a 3-hour award ceremony at the end. Where usually you don't get the result.
Usually you don't get a medal. Yeah.
It's brutal. I mean, it's brutal. It's a brutal marathon, and you have to be prepared. Oh, and going back to the theme of today's episode, I mean, to put together a collection of 40 individuals that can be their best across that set of constraints is really epic.
Yeah. So there's surely all individuals who are that N+1. So then do you feel like, Andrew, maybe the conclusion, like regarding this equation that's been presented here is like maybe something like, yes, but hold on to it lightly? Something like that?
I would keep the vibe and ditch the formula. So
that's a cool way to put it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the vibe is, okay, our band is only going to be as good as the constituents in the band. And so a big part of running my band and building my band is going to be to stimulate the individuals to get, you know, better and better as individuals. Like, that's a big part of it. And only then will the slaving away on Bandcraft elements really pay off.
It seems like an interesting point for band leadership to keep in mind, musical and otherwise, that like, if you want the band to do better, band focus might not be the way. Individual focus will improve the band.
If you really want your band to get better, play one-on-one and have one-on-one sessions with everyone in your pipe corps on a regular basis. Period.
And the drummers will come along,
simple.
right? Of course,
No,
we're always
but
talking
the
about
the drummers should do the same thing.
Yeah,
If you want your drum corps to get better, the leading drummer should sit down and play one-on-one and give feedback one-on-one, not in a group, one-on-one. Basically, if you want your band to get better, teach them every week as individuals. By the way, that's just thinking about Maureen Connor's local band here. The key part of the formula is if you want to play in the band, you will be getting lessons. Usually from Maureen, and if not directly from Maureen, then you're going to get lessons from someone she trusts to teach you to become a really good player as an individual. And then what do you know? Like, she puts out successful bands time and time again. And the formula is not that complicated. Now, as adults in adult bands, we're like, well, I have a job. I don't have time to work with everyone one-on-one. Cool, man. But until you figure out some sort of way to ensure that your individuals are improving as individuals, then once you figure out what Bandcraft elements you're going to do, that's going to represent the ceiling as high as you're going to go.
Or put another way, you will languish.
I mean, yeah, I guess so.
I was just looking for another chance to use the word languish. I'm sure that's over much in this situation.
It depends on the size and strength of your pond as to whether or not you languish. Yeah. Like if you're the only grade 1 band in a 600-mile radius and you never leave that 600-mile radius, you might not languish. But your band definitely could still plateau.
Yeah.
Right. And so there you go. St. Thomas comes to mind as a band that reached out this year and they put themselves in a lot of challenging situations. Like they went to Seattle. That's far from Houston, right? Seattle, pretty far. They went to Seattle. I think they went to Chicago. I might be maybe they didn't. No, they did. So they went to Chicago, they went to Seattle, and then they went to Perth, and then they went to the Worlds. So they're making sure their pond stays as big as possible. And sure enough, I mean, that alongside of a lot of other really they increase the quality of player in the band, I think, probably, but also just, doing a lot of smart things. And then what do you notice? A huge rise in the quality and placing of the band.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Good for them. Hats off to St. Thomas. Crushing it. But then a lot of it is like, what if the judges just don't like what you're doing?
Yeah.
So even though your band
can't think that way.
No. I mean, it's a definite possibility. So maybe your band is way, 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 way better, but the judges just didn't really like it that much.
Didn't like the tunes you picked that year.
Yeah. And so your band might actually be way better, or you may have drastically expanded your potential, but it's just not recognized yet because the judges, think your pitch is too high. And so that sort of overshadows their feedback. And so your results actually don't change, even though you're way better. These are all possibilities, which is why the languishing and the formula, it's like, I think we can chuck the formula, but the spirit of the formula is probably pretty close to what the spirit of our approach to running our band should be.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, I want to say thank you to Mark for writing in.
Yeah, thank Mark
I
B.
want to encourage anybody else. There's nothing you could write in that would be so bad that we're going to be like, you're not allowed to write in ever again. Anything that gets written in, I'll present it to Andrew. If it seems like we can talk about it, we talk about it. So write in. It's awesome.
Yeah, no politics and no religion.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
keep
it focused on the music if you could, yeah.
Yeah, anything that you could write in that you'd be willing to discuss at the dinner table.
There you go. That's a good criteria.
Maybe. I don't know. All right. Another one in the bag, Jim.
Hey everybody, Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.